Hello and welcome to the Northwood University webinar series. I'm Christopher Deming, back again. Today we have Professor Jim Hopp, Chair of our Entrepreneurship Program and Franchising Management Program at Northwood University. He's here to talk about small business. The engine that powers America wants to get back to work, speaking about small business and the effect of the pandemic on them. Before we get started, we have a couple of housekeeping items that I did want to address. We are moving our format from a weekly webinar format to a monthly webinar format, so we look forward to seeing you here again next month. You'll receive more information via email and via social media if you'd like to join us for that. This webinar is being recorded. You will receive a copy of it after the fact with a survey and a copy of the presentation materials that Professor Hopp has created. Without any further delay, please welcome Professor Jim Hopp.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate it. Happy to be here. Welcome to the presentation. Before I get started, I did want to recognize that Northwood University lost one of our founders this week. On July 6th, Willa Stauffer passed away, and she's the last of the four founding members. And I just wanted to recognize all that she has done for Northwood, all that she's been to Northwood. And as I was reading her obituary, I noticed that in lieu of flowers, they asked for donations to Northwood to a scholarship fund that will be started in her name. So, Willa Stauffer, thank you. I was able to meet her a couple times. Just a fantastic lady, and we will miss you greatly. But you will always be remembered by those of us at Northwood. So I am Professor Hopp. I chair the Entrepreneurship and the Franchising Management departments at Northwood. But I haven't been in academia all my life. In fact, I've spent the last 11 years at Northwood, but I have been an owner and president of a 10-person medical bill review firm, and I was also involved in a 50-person manufacturing company. We did plastic thermoforming. So I've been in management positions and ownership. I've had to make payroll, and I think that makes a difference as we look at what we're going to look at today. So let's get started by talking about what is small business. Like so many things, lots of different definitions, but I got some stats and facts that I'd like to share with you as we put this into perspective. So as you can see on your screen, you can see the PowerPoint, and I'll be covering all of that and maybe some additional information. There are over 30 million small businesses in the U.S., and they comprise 99.7% of all businesses. Now, you might be asking yourself, how is that possible? We've got companies like Dow and General Motors and Ford. How can this be true? Well, the very large companies only represent 0.3 of all businesses, and so that's where we get to the 99.7. So small businesses are a huge part of who America is and what we are. Generally speaking, we talk about small businesses having less than 500 employees. Sometimes we limit it to 100 employees. Small businesses, the employees of small businesses make up approximately half of the United States workforce. And very interesting, 95% of small businesses have 10 employees or less. A couple more stats. They create 2/3 of all new jobs, and they drive innovation. And I know what you're thinking. Now, Apple and Microsoft drive innovation. Small businesses are often more innovative when it comes to number of patents and number of innovations based on the company size. And so small business owner-operators really do drive innovation in this country. And then, of course, got to have some more economics. Small businesses generate about 44% of the U.S. economy. All right, so let's do a quick legal definition. A small business is an independently owned and operated business that is not dominant in its field of operation and conforms to the standards set by the SBA. So that's kind of our definition. I would like to make a note, though, because it's been interesting to me as the discussion about who should get the PPP loans and what represents a small business. Many franchise businesses are actually small businesses. Although the franchise business and name might be big, for instance, all Subway franchises are owned by franchisees. They do not have a single corporate store. And so in many cases, that franchise is just a one franchise business and very much represents a small business. On the other side of the coin, in some cases, there might be somebody who owns 500 franchise units, and obviously they would be a much bigger business. But I do think we want to make sure we understand that many franchise businesses, although they carry the brand name we all recognize, there's an individual or individuals behind that store. And so they're included in this as well. So COVID-19, what impact has COVID-19 had on small business? Well, obviously the federal government declared it to be a pandemic, and Governor Whitmer here in the state of Michigan declared her stay-at-home executive order on March 24, and that changed the landscape of business as we knew it. Stay home, right? We determined who essential businesses were and who essential employees were and who was non-essential. And that's a pretty difficult place to be. Nobody wants to be non-essential. We all think we're essential. We all think our businesses are essential. And that was kind of tough. So again, who is essential and who is not? Let me give you some stats on that. From the federal government standpoint, healthcare and public health, law enforcement, food and agriculture, energy, water and wastewater, transportation and logistics, public works, community-based government operations, critical manufacturing, hazardous materials, financial services, chemical, and defense-based. Michigan took it a little bit further and said for Michigan, essential services will include restaurants, but only for takeout and delivery, hotels, grocery stores, convenience stores, gas stations and service garages, drugstores, banks and credit unions, laundromats, and marijuana retailers. So if you fit one of those categories, you were deemed essential and you were able to continue to work. But if you were deemed non-essential, you were not only told you may not open your doors, you were told that you might be slapped with a $500 fine and up to 90 days in jail. I like to think of America being a free market economy. Northwood is the free market university. This is how we approach things. Very difficult, I think, for a small business owner to be told you don't count, you're not essential, you can't run your business, you can't put food on the table for your family. There's a psychological piece to that I think was ignored. Now, I don't want you to think Professor Hop doesn't care about the health. Of course I do. Of course I understood that the first couple of weeks were to reduce the curve, right? And to spread it out and to make sure our healthcare systems could handle the impact. Of course we didn't know the total impact that COVID-19 was going to have. But now we're months into this, and the stay-home order has continued to be extended, which I think has been a bit of a problem. And there's still many small businesses today that aren't allowed to be open based on what the government says. So what does this mean for small business? What does it mean to have a stay-home order? What does it mean to be essential or non-essential? Well, McKinsey & Company in a May 5 article has some interesting stats. 33 million small business jobs are vulnerable because of COVID-19. Unemployment claims exceeded 30 million 6 weeks into this pandemic. 50% of jobs at firms with 100 or less are vulnerable. And again, before the crisis, this was a really interesting stat to me. Before the crisis, median small businesses had about a 27-day cash reserve buffer. So the very next week after the stay-home order came out, in fact, it was within days of that, there were articles and discussions about, small businesses are going to go out of business. They don't have the cash. What are they going to do? And one of my very good mentors, Ted Lunt, came to me and said in an email, Jim, when you get back to school, can you make sure you spend time on talking about the importance of creating a reserve, creating the buffer, creating the ability to weather certain storms? Now, at this point, we thought it was going to be a 2-week flattening of the curve and things might get back to normal. We now know later that we're not back to normal. We don't know what normal is. And but his point was well taken. And I made a promise to him that day that I would talk about it. We do talk about it, but I would specifically talk about that. But it's sort of tricky when we think about small businesses and keeping a reserve. One of the things in the entrepreneurial finance class we talk about is cash. What do you do with cash if you have cash? And of course, most small businesses are reinvesting in their business, and so when cash comes in and when cash is available, they look to expand their store or their operations or their customer base or their product line. And why? Because we want the greatest return, right? The profit motive is very powerful. And the profit motive says, I must continue to listen to what the customers want, provide the customers what they need, give the customers great service. And to do that, it takes capital. I hate it when I hear people talk about, oh, businesses just hoard their profits. Not the businesses I know. The businesses I know reinvest. They put money back into the business. They take care of their employees. They build things for the customer. And so it's tricky. How much cash do I keep in reserve? How much cash do I use for expansion? A friend of mine, Chuck Cote, once said, when you're green, you grow, and when you're ripe, you rot. And I've never forgotten that statement from Chuck because it's meaningful. When you're green, you grow. You've got to keep growing. You've got to look for opportunities. And so you put the cash to work. When something like COVID-19 hits, it puts a damper on that. Not only are you stopping potential growth, but now you've got to find cash when cash stops coming in. Cash is clearly the lifeblood of any business. Anybody who's taken me in class knows that you can't graduate from the entrepreneurship program without knowing that what? Cash is king. Absolutely. Cash pays for payroll. Cash pays suppliers. Cash makes the business grow. A 27-day cash reserve buffer really, that wasn't too bad. But that was 2 months ago that would have emptied out if you had lost revenue at that point. SBAM, the Small Business Association of Michigan, put out a survey. I believe it was 1,600. Let me look at that. I believe it was 1,600 companies that they talked to. 1 in 7 businesses, or 14% of small businesses, are not confident they can survive COVID-19. Now, we know that businesses close every year and new businesses pop up every year. We know that that's the life cycle of business. But to know that 1 in 7 are not confident they will survive this, that's kind of scary. 60% of small businesses laid off at least 1 employee. 50% of small businesses don't have the ability for workers to work from home. I was lucky. When we shut down campus, I was able to teach right from here, right where I'm talking to you today. Didn't like it. I want to be face-to-face with the students. I think the students want that. We hope to have that when we come back this fall. But we were able to work from home. My wife was able to work from home. We were not impacted as badly as some were. But again, 50% don't even have the ability to do that. So it's not just as easy as saying, oh, just work from home. That will fly. 72% of small businesses applied for the PPP loans, right? That's a payroll protection plan. And that's a huge number. Now that we'll talk a little bit about that down the line here. 43% of small businesses applied for other loans. What I want you to remember is that's great. You get a loan, that gives you cash flow to help you pay the bills. But guess what? As a former banker, those loans have to be paid back. There are loan agreements, legal documents that you've signed, and those have to be paid back. So what, where's that cash going to come from? The longer we wait to get back into full operation, the worse off we'll be there. And again, here's another scary fact. Only 28% of small businesses are certain that they will survive COVID-19. That's, basically 1 in 4 businesses. That's not a place where we want to be. So what are the issues facing small business? Well, obviously access to capital. Most small businesses' access to capital comes through the daily cash flow from sales and collections, right? I have a little saying, a sale is not a sale until I collect it. Obviously, if you're not making new sales, you're not collecting any of that money. If you had outstanding sales before shutdown, you may not have collected that money because every business was looking to tighten up and not put out any cash because they needed cash to operate their own business. So access to capital is going to be vital. Banks are going to get stretched. Credit unions are going to get stretched with their ability to lend. Luckily, through the payroll protection plan, the government allowed banks to fund these low interest loans. But access to capital. Access to capital is important at any time, but it's even more vital today. They're facing an uncertain future. You saw the SBAM survey numbers. 1 in 7 aren't sure they're going to survive. Only 1 in 4 are confident that they're going to make it through this. When you are uncertain, sometimes you can make poor decisions. And so we want more certainty, of course. one thing we're seeing for sure is that you need to have the adoption of internet tools. What am I getting at? Well, who are the companies that are being very successful right now? Right? We can all throw out Amazon. Amazon, because of the nature of how they're set up, has been very successful because UPS and FedEx and the U.S. Postal Service are delivering their packages on a daily basis. People were told to stay at home. When I'm told to stay at home, how do I get my stuff? I have it sent to me. If you don't have the ability to have internet tools be part of your business, you're in trouble. If you need someone to come to your business, right, and you're closed down, that's going to lock up your cash flow. So if you haven't already done it, you need to find ways to adopt the internet and internet tools. You need to figure out a way to have online shopping. You need to find a way to be able to ship your product. If you're in the service industry, that's even tougher, of course. But we're seeing the importance of that today. If you didn't think e-commerce was important before, you certainly see the importance of it today. We're trying to run a business and we're trying to care for our households. Excuse me. When schools were shut down, school children came home. Somebody had to watch them. We forget that for 9 months of the year, the schools act as sort of a daycare. Obviously, that's not their function, but it does. It keeps them busy. It allows dual income families to be working. And if your business was shut down, I guess you could stay at home. But again, now you've got cash flow issues. So you're running a business and caring for a household. It doubles what your needs are. And then another one is, how do we remain optimistic? Entrepreneurs, by their very nature, and small business owners, by their very nature, are optimistic people. If they weren't optimistic, they would never get into business, right? Because business has a high chance of failure. There are certain risks involved. So how do we get back to a level of optimism? And look, quite frankly, the media doesn't give us reason to be optimistic. Every night on thousands of different internet channels or television channels or on our devices, we're being told how bad things are, how much worse they're going to get. And so it's hard to be optimistic in those circumstances. All right, so what's being done? Man, life is not good. What's being done? Well, federal government stepped in, the state governments have stepped up, and they've done a few things. Quite frankly, these can be viewed as good. I view them as kind of scary, and here's what they've done. The CARES Act was signed. And the CARES Act is the COVID Aid Relief and Economic Securities Act, a $2.2 trillion act passed by the federal government. That's a mind-boggling number. I don't care who you are or what business you're involved in. 2.2 trillion was just shoved back out. How was it done? $349 billion in low-interest loans to small businesses through the Payroll Protection Plan. Loans are, what's interesting about the PPP, I think it was done kind of in a smart way. They're 1% loans. The first round of loans have a 2-year maturity. Second round have a 5-year maturity. But the loans can be completely forgiven if at least 60% of the loan proceeds go to pay for payroll. So what was this all about? Well, this was pretty smart, even though we've seen 30 million unemployment claims. The idea of this was to provide money to small businesses to allow them to continue to pay their employees, keep their businesses open. That was the intent. Of course, as with most government programs, we saw abuses. We absolutely saw abuses. We saw people taking this money that didn't need the money. With a quickly approved federal program, it had way too many holes in it. One of the holes was, if my business was still operating, I could still take a PPP loan and pay my employees even though I still had sales. I still had cash flow coming in. That was a huge boom to those businesses. I'm not blaming them for taking it, but they didn't necessarily need the money. They were operating. This money was really intended for small businesses that were paying their employees, keeping them off the unemployment rolls. Again, an additional $310 billion was added because that $349 billion was wiped out almost immediately. So the federal government's doing some things. In addition, they increased unemployment benefits. I want to take a second and talk about that. Look, if you're laid off and you're unemployed, absolutely, unemployment benefits are very important. They extended the normal time unemployment benefits can go from 26 to 39 weeks. And they threw in an extra $600 weekly through July 31st. That sounds fantastic. And if you were laid off, this is very important money. But again, we see the problem with government largesse, at least from my perspective. Many people who got the $600 bonus were actually receiving more money in unemployment than they did when they worked. That doesn't make sense to me. That's not how it should work. I shouldn't be able to be unemployed and make more money. I know of several businesses and business owners I've talked to who've had employees say, please don't bring me back till at least August 1 because I want to continue to get the benefit of this extra $600 of unemployment. And so they've created a disincentive to work, right? As a small business owner with employees, we don't want to create disincentive for people to work. In addition to this, and this one bothered me, college students who were coming into the workforce for the summer but hadn't actually got a job lined up or even an internship were able to apply for unemployment and claim that because their internship or their summer job didn't come through, they were now unemployed and have not only been receiving unemployment benefits, but this bonus of $600. I'm not against the people receiving the unemployment aid. I'm against how it was set up. I'm against the fact that it disincents people to go to work. Also, we had some stimulus checks which went out to individuals to help them meet their daily needs and to continue to put money back into the economy. And then in addition to that, there were some loans for large businesses as well. All right, so what does all this mean? We're in uncertain times. We're in times that we haven't been in before. But my first thing I say is even in a country that espouses to be a free market economy, external forces and the government can and do have a big impact on those businesses to no fault of their own. The second thing we need to know and understand, and I think most people get, but they really have to live by it, is that cash is king. Cash truly is king. It's how we make payroll. It's how we pay for suppliers. It's the lifeblood of the business is cash flow. Now, you certainly have to make a product or provide a service that people want and are willing to pay for, but cash is king. It's very important. I think back to 2009, just a little side note. Remember when we bailed out General Motors and Chrysler at the time? Ford did not get bailed out. Does anybody remember why? They had taken a $20 billion line of credit about 1 month before the collapse, and they were able to utilize that line of credit to work through that economic downturn and didn't have to give up to the bankruptcy, to the forced bankruptcy by the government. So again, cash is king. Whatever form capital comes in or cash comes in. As I pointed out earlier, e-commerce is becoming vital for nearly all businesses. If you don't have e-commerce, you're probably going to be in trouble moving forward. Providing a need is often better than providing a want, right? If I've got a product or a service that is needed, it's often better than something that's wanted. And again, wants are great, and you can make a lot of money selling wants, but if you want to be essential, you need to provide a need. Government often picks winners and losers when they get involved in the economy. Again, I'm a free market guy. I espouse the virtues of the free market, and we want to have limited government. Did government need to step in? Of course they did, because they're the ones who shut everything down. But government picks winners and losers. Amazon got picked as a winner because of what they're doing. We picked different businesses that became winners. If you were a restaurant that had takeout and delivery, good for you. If you weren't, close your doors. Very difficult. And then risk. Risk is important to entrepreneurship, but it's not the most important thing. But risk comes in many forms, and we must understand the risks in order to mitigate them. I'm not telling anybody out there that we could have fully mitigated the risk of being shut down for 3 months or maybe 6 months, right? We're seeing an uptick in COVID cases. I think that's interesting. It's COVID cases, not you can get sick without having to go to the hospital. And so now we're talking about cutting back again on reopening the economy. What we're seeing is the importance of what the economy means to states and to this country. And we're seeing the impact of what happens when we shut those down. All right. Some small businesses will find opportunities during this crisis. If you're in a position to find an opportunity, go for it, right? Stress and those types of issues create opportunities for businesses. I saw an enormous number of small businesses step up and make masks and shields and ventilators and other things to help out with the economy, and good for them. Now, as I think about the state of Michigan in particular, one of the things that really has me worried is the upper part of the Lower Peninsula and the Upper Peninsula, right? Think about all the small businesses. Many of us have traveled north, and we've gone to these places. Many of these businesses up north count on their revenues from a short time frame, many times from Memorial Day to Labor Day. We're in the meat of their cash flow season, of their revenue generating season. And many of those businesses were either shut down or they're limited. If you've gone to a sit-down restaurant recently, it's a 50% number, which really they can only put 50% of the seats in there. They're going to have trouble driving enough revenues to make money. I'm very concerned that cash flow is not going to be generated by those companies and those businesses up north that will allow them to get to this winter. This isn't going to end and then it's just going to be good again, right? Companies are going to have to take time to come back around. Whoops, we'll go back to that slide. So there's lots more data. There's lots more things to cover. I tried to get that all into 30 minutes, and I think I came pretty close. At this point, I would like to open it up to any questions that people may have, and we'll do our best to try to answer those.
Thank you so much, Professor Hopp, for that very, very insightful presentation. We do have one question in the hopper. I have a question of my own, but I'll address this one first from Graham Williams. Okay. I think if I remember right, you just got involved with a new business. What was the one big thing you learned in the process of bringing that together? I do want to add one additional part to that is, especially considering the scenario we find ourselves in the middle of pandemic and, some other economic troubles that we've had.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Graham. I'm actually quite excited. Last week, we signed an agreement to become a Big B franchisee. I went into business with Corey and Norma Peischer. Corey's a 2012 graduate of Northwood, one of my entrepreneurship students. I'm thrilled to be able to get into a franchise business since I teach franchising. I guess part of what it came about, we started talking about this in the fall before COVID hit. When COVID hit, we didn't stop talking about the opportunity because you can't stop, right? You just can't stop doing business or looking for business. Are we a little bit concerned? Sure, right? I'll just say it, it's Big B Coffee. And so the inside part was closed, but if you have a drive-through, that can be open. We see this as an opportunity to get involved with a great organization, and we want to grow from there. We are optimistic. We think the economy will come back. We're not just hopeful, we're planning on it coming back. And so we want to be in a position to take advantage of that. As I mentioned earlier, my wife and I have been blessed to be able to continue to work through this. So we weren't financially as impacted as some. And so when an opportunity presents itself, you look at all the risk factors, you look at what the mitigation is. My biggest concern about getting into that, of course, will be capital access. Got some of my own capital, but we'll be looking for a bank loan. Luckily, with my banking background, I made some calls to some people I know in the banking industry and said, hey, are you guys still lending non-PPP loans? Is there capital out there? And we've been told there is capital out there. If you've got the right business and the right idea, capital will find you. So I hope that answers your question, Graham. We see it as an opportunity. And when opportunity strikes, we didn't want to wait. We wanted to be in a position to take advantage when this economy bounces back. This is still the best country in the world, and we want to be part of the best economy in the best country in the world.
As moderator of this, I get the prerogative to ask my own question, so I'm coming after you, Jim.
Okay, here we go.
I'm curious to know, actually, to hear your perspective on one of the things that's really hit the limelight here recently is tackling occupational licensure. And a lot of the things in various states, small businesses include things like haircutting, and we know in the state of Michigan that was shut down relatively quickly and has only recently come back. What effect do you think these kind of relaxation of occupational licensures, specifically for nurses, but for other things, will affect other small business owners?
You mean allowing them to come back to work? or the ability
Uh,
to get a license at all?
uh, Allowing to get a license at all, and just opening up it being more available for people to go into those occupations. I'm
Okay.
thinking in specific about people who own their own salons or
Oh yeah. I mean,
things like that.
we certainly saw the situation in Owasso where the gentleman down there says, I'm going to run my business, and it's been in court. It, it's really tricky. Who gets to decide whether you're essential or not essential? Who gets to decide what's safe and what's not safe? Um, we believe in individual responsibility, and we teach it and we preach it at Northwood. And so I want to think, and I believe that business owners will do what's right for their customers. Because if you don't do what's right for your customer, you're not going to be in business. So you're going to take the precautions to do what needs to be done. I think everybody has to decide for themselves. Maybe you just won't get a haircut for the next year. But of course, we want to be able to do this. It does represent a lot of small businesses. It's really tricky. I've been very frustrated with our governor and the approach he's taken on some of these things. The evidence that backs up who should and who shouldn't be open is very difficult, and telling someone that they can't run their business is very difficult. And of course, in that case, they said, great, you won a court case and you can go back to work. We're going to pull your license, which allows you to operate. So it just again points out the ability of government to restrict what we can do in business. And again, I don't want the Wild West, right? We want good, we want to protect consumers, but we do want to allow businesses to follow their passion and to do what they do best. This might not be answering your question, but I do want a chance to talk about it. During the end of the semester, I have a student in Northville, Michigan, Jack Gertley, terrific young man. He runs Gertley Landscaping. He started it when he was 14 years old. This year, he's got 15 guys on his crew. He was chomping at the bit to get going. Landscaping is an outdoor activity. It can be socially distanced, and it was denied. He could not start his business. And people people were at home, right? They wanted to get their stuff going. Now, of course, that's been opened up, and he's going great guns. But when I looked at the frustration of him not being able to run the business that he started when he was 14 years old, with the people saying, hey, when can you get out here? When can you do this for me? That's frustrating, right? And to be told you can't do that is frustrating. I'm not sure I answered your question great there, Chris,
No,
but
no,
if
you
you want
did.
to rephrase it, okay, all right.
No, you did. Yeah,
Good.
it's challenging to say the least, and I think
It
you
is.
encapsulated that correctly. Well, with respect for your time and the time of our attendees, we do typically keep these to as close to 30 minutes as we can, and we're just rounding 33 minutes at this point. So I want to say thank you very much, Professor Hopp, for joining us today. We hope to see you back in one of these webinar series as a later date. As a reminder to our guests, you will be receiving a copy of this presentation typically later this afternoon, along with a survey. Please fill out the survey when you get an opportunity. We take all of the suggestions and comments to heart to improve these events for the future. And we look forward to having you here again with us sometime in August with our next speaker. Thank you so much.
Thanks.